Hi everyone, thanks for joining me for another session of stories right here on Thailand Bound on this Saturday morning. It's a bit of a marathon today. I've got 6 stories for you today, all very, very good. The background video that you're going to be watching today, I actually shot last week. I'm walking from the Plonchit Centre all the way down to the end of Soi 2. Now, Soi 2 is a very interesting soi for several reasons, but mainly because there's a very old hotel you'll see as I'm walking past it called the Atlanta Hotel, which has been there for many, many years. It has a famous sign next to the front door. I won't tell you what it is right now. You can watch the video in the background. And this hotel was actually used for some of the filming scenes in the famous Netflix series, The Serpent. So let's not waste any time. Let's get straight into the first of 6 stories.
สวัสดีค่ะ
I have been living in Bangkok for many years, and while having an oil massage session with one of my regulars, she asked me a curious question. Do you have any rich friends who may be interested in investing in a massage business? She had been working in this shop and knew the business very well. She had a couple of partners who were going to start the business, but one of them had to pull out at the last minute, as she wanted to open a bar instead. So she was looking for an investor to take over that partner's share. I told her to give me some time and I would get back to her as soon as possible. I had an older retired friend who had been visiting Bangkok frequently. I knew that he was pretty well to do, so I mentioned this business opportunity to him. He knew of this girl as well, but he said he would only invest if I invested in it as well. Well, as luck would have it, I had just liquidated some of my company's shares, so I had some spare cash. Since we were both getting into it, the risk would be smaller, and if the business went bankrupt, it would be a learning experience for both of us. So I called the girl and gave her the good news. Since my friend was a tourist, he did not want his name in any of the company documents, so I was his proxy for our share. Everything was above board. A company was set up with proper documentation, etc. Of course, everything was in Thai, and luckily I could read it, so it was not a problem for me. The girl, let us call her partner A, and her friend partner B had already been shopping around for a location and found one. The rent was decent. What was needed was some cleaning up and renovations. I tagged along with the girls to get the furniture and fittings. Most of the room would have the basic setup: bed, air conditioner, and a smaller shower stall. There would be one special room which would have a bathtub and a large mirror. Since we were minor partners, we would offer suggestions, as it was up to the girls to make the decisions. Besides, this was a business that they had been working in, so they knew exactly what was required. We offered suggestions from the customer's perspective, which was an interesting combination. There was a joke about a guy applying for an accounting job. The applicant said that he knew the triple entry system. The boss asked, "What's that?" To which the applicant replied, "We have one entry for the taxman, one entry for the partners, and one for you." He got the job. Looking at the business on the surface, its main income came from the massage fee and incidental sale of refreshments. Based on that itself, the business can generate enough income after deducting the expenses, providing a decent profit. However, there is an undocumented income which comes from the sale of the consumables to the girls, such as the oil and the Nuru gel. The business started slowly in the first couple of months and was generating good income. There was a small bump before the first year ended, as partner B had fallen out, so partner A took over her shares. For 3 years, it was smooth sailing, and in fact, by then, we had almost doubled our initial investment. Now, being local, I would get informed of any new girls who have started work in the shop. It was an unofficial duty of mine to try out the girls. I would then give feedback to partner A, informing her of any shortcomings in the massage or aerobics department. She would then remedy that by providing her extra training. During the good times, the company organised company trips, and that was literally the icing on the cake. So imagine being the only guys going out with 20 to 25 girls to a resort, all paid for by the company. I remember a photograph of a famous soapy massage owner with 4 girls in a jacuzzi tub. Well, we managed to get our photo with 16 girls in a swimming pool. There are a lot of interesting stories about the shop. There would be customers asking for a couple of girls to get drunk with him. Fortunately, partner A was very protective of the girls and wouldn't let them go with such characters. There was a guy asking for 3 girls at a time, 6 hand massage. Aerobics would be very interesting. Things were not always rosy and the business suffered during the protests and the floods. And by then, the business went down the tubes. I had a discussion with my friend and we figured that we'd already gotten our return on our investment and more, and we decided to sell our shares to partner A. She was ever so grateful and she managed to sell the business. I did not get any details from her. It was an interesting journey for me and my friend. We had a great experience with this project. Even if we had lost our money, the fun we had would have made up for it, but we actually made a profit. So that is how it happened. We never planned for it. We just went with the flow. So if that is truly a genuine story, which I'm kind of 50-50, I'll just say it sounds like the guy died and went to heaven. It's very unusual for a foreign guy to be able to read Thai as well as speak it. So I'll just take this story as it comes, as entertainment. Let's jump straight into story number 2. My name is Jonas. I enjoy listening to your channel, particularly the stories. Almost all of the stories on your channel, as well as others, involve single men who are either looking for vacation fun or seeking a long-term relationship, perhaps even love. Some stories end in disaster while a few have happy endings. Initially, I was reluctant to share my story as it is rather unique, but after some thought, I believe it could help many others in similar situations. There are plenty of us out there. I am currently 70 years old and have been married to my first and only wife for the last 40 years. My wife is 66 years old. As often happens after menopause, my wife lost interest in the bedroom department, which progressed to the point where she shows no inclination towards anything romantic. Unfortunately, she does not even try to pretend. Additionally, as she has aged, she is no longer physically attractive to me, although she does keep in decent shape, staying fit without an ounce of extra weight. Outside of that, she is an intelligent, honest and dependable person. We have 3 children and 5 grandchildren, and we are very close as a family. Neither of us is interested in divorce, as we do not want to break up the family. On top of that, we have substantial financial assets that we could fight over endlessly, with much of it going to lawyers. Despite my age, my libido has not diminished significantly, and when I see a young, beautiful woman, I feel like a young man again, looking for some action. I have had 2 affairs since my wife stopped being interested in the bedroom. Both ended because the women involved wanted me to leave my family and marry them. One, likely for financial reasons. My wife discovered one of the affairs after accidentally finding a letter from my lover, but perhaps she understood the reason for my infidelity. As she did not seek a divorce, though, she was truly angry. After I retired about 2 years ago, I came across your channel while surfing the internet. Hearing all these stories about older men going to Thailand and enjoying the time with beautiful young women really got my interest up. Why shouldn't an older man enjoy the company of a younger woman before he loses interest or passes on? Since the woman would be paid for her time, it seems like a win-win situation. I am a fairly social person and have several friends in my age group. Most of them complain that their wives are no longer interested in the bedroom department. Some of them end up satisfying themselves by watching adult videos or using escort services, while others live in quiet depression. After watching your channel for a few months, I decided to use your consultancy service, which I found extremely helpful, and I highly recommend it to anyone going to Thailand for the first time. Initially, I was going to travel with a friend, but he cancelled at the last minute, so I ended up going alone. After watching all the videos and using the consultation service you offer, I was well aware of the potential scams and tricks that working girls use to increase their income. I was not interested in a long-term relationship, or even worse, falling in love, as my family remains the most important part of my life. Upon arriving in Bangkok and getting a good sleep after a restless night on the plane, I headed to the Therme Cafe. However, I didn't even make it inside because I met a beautiful freelancer outside of the hotel. I had learnt my lessons well, so I started a conversation and smiled as much as I could. I agreed to her terms and we went to my hotel for our private session. Unfortunately, I could not perform because intrusive thoughts crept in about how many other men she had been with and the fact that she was doing it purely for financial gain. These thoughts prevented me from fully relaxing. The woman, however, was very kind. She smiled a lot and seemed to understand. Perhaps this situation benefited her too, as she had less stress for the same financial reward. I still enjoyed the experience of having a woman likely only 25 or 30 years old beside me, admiring her youthful body and touching her skin. In addition to Bangkok, I travelled to Phuket and Koh Samui, where I enjoyed the beaches, temples and island excursions. The only downside was the hot weather, which I do not like or handle well, but Thailand is a beautiful country to explore, even without the nightlife. I do not enjoy drinking and never participate in the bar scene. The idea of bar girls trying to extract money from you for drinks and paying bar fines turns me off, as it feels too transactional. Apart from freelancers, and I met four, I also tried a soapy massage once, which was an interesting experience, although the woman was mechanical in her approach. I must confess I was never able to perform during any of these encounters due to intrusive thoughts, but I still enjoyed the experiences mainly because of the intimate setting with a beautiful young woman. I am sure many men don't mind the fact that their partners have many clients or that the relationship is ultimately about the money, but I guess I'm more sensitive to those concerns. Nonetheless, I enjoy the experiences and I'm now planning to return with another friend. Hopefully he will not cancel this time. I have a few tips for the many married men out there whose wives are no longer interested in the bedroom department. Always treat the girls with politeness and respect and smile even when it's difficult. Like most business people, they will try to get more money from you by telling you sob stories, asking to go shopping or wanting you to become a sponsor. Always refuse with a smile. I told them I could not afford more than the agreed upon price or that I was married and just came to Thailand for fun. Watch plenty of YouTube channels about Thailand to get some tips before you go for the first time. And please never fall in love with a working girl. I actually remember this guy well because when he's had a couple of sessions with me where he's phoned me up and asked for advice on various bits and pieces around Thailand. And I remember on one of his calls, he was actually sitting in his car. It was in the UK. Outside. It was freezing, and I guess his family were in, and he was sitting in his car freezing to death. But we got through the session anyway. Good story. Right, let's jump straight into story number 3. In my late 20s, I had the chance to visit Thailand for the first time. It was not a spontaneous trip, rather it was because a relative of mine had moved there after retiring. He lived on Koh Samui and had been encouraging me to visit for quite some time. Back in the UK, I had trained in a well-paying trade, which allowed me to make the trip earlier than I might have otherwise. My experience in Thailand was full of excitement, but I soon learned the ropes of navigating the local culture, especially around the bar scene. I quickly realised how some foreign men often fall victim to the charms of bar girls, getting treated as walking ATMs. It was not long before I became wise to these tricks, but not before learning the hard way. Things took a different turn when my cousin returned to the UK with his new girlfriend from Isan, the northeastern part of Thailand. I frequently visited them, and over time I grew close to her. She was kind and always made an effort cooking for me whenever I dropped by. I had always admired Thai culture and was taken by how caring she was, which left a strong impression on me. Over one evening, I opened to her about my desire to find an honest, serious partner. She listened quietly but seemed to understand. Eventually, she suggested I meet a woman named May, someone close to my age from her hometown in Isan. May worked in a profession similar to mine, so my cousin's girlfriend believed we might have a lot in common. Intrigued by the prospect, I asked her to set up an introduction. That same night, after a few drinks, my cousin's girlfriend called May and arranged a Skype meeting. May appeared on screen. She was stunning, with long hair, a calm presence, and an incredible command of English. She had big plans too, including studying for a master's degree in the UK one day. Her ambition and confidence left me fascinated. We exchanged numbers, and soon daily communication became the norm. Between emails, line messages, and Skype calls, we quickly built a connection, and the countdown to my next trip to Thailand began. In one conversation, May suggested that when I arrived, she could take me to Koh Samet for the day. She also mentioned that her mother had invited me to their family home in Isan. Although I had not been to Isan before, I was curious and agreed to visit. When I finally landed in Bangkok, I was brimming with excitement. At the airport, May greeted me with a colleague. I had not expected her to bring anyone along, but I understood her caution. We had never met in person before. We made our way to Pattaya, where May had booked separate rooms for us, and I behaved myself, mindful of how special this opportunity felt. The next morning, we headed to Koh Samet by speedboat. It was a perfect day on the beach, but what stuck out most was when May complained about the food at a restaurant and insisted on a new dish being prepared. I thought the food was excellent, but May's standards were clearly high. Later in the day, May's colleague left and we were finally alone. May was warm and open, and we spent the evening laughing and getting to know each other better. That night, we stayed in a room with 2 beds, and I kept my distance, reminding myself to be patient. A few days later, after May finished work, we flew to Phuket, her hometown in Isan. Her family welcomed me warmly, and their home was far from the impoverished image I had imagined. Over the next few days, we went on family outings, exploring waterfalls and scenic points in the region. The food was incredible. I felt truly welcomed. As a gesture of thanks, I offered her mother 5,000 baht, but she'd politely declined. Back in Bangkok, May invited me to stay at her rented shop house for a few days. We shared a bed, and while I had been patient, things finally took a romantic turn. The next day, she was embarrassed and apologized, but I reassured her that there was no need to feel that way. Over the next few days, we spent more time together, including a trip to Hua Hin, where I learnt more about Thai preferences for vacation spots. My final night in Thailand was bittersweet. May told me she would not be spending the night with me as she had plans to stay with her colleague. I felt disappointed, especially since it would be months before I could return to Thailand. The night felt empty, so I ventured out to a bar, had a few drinks, and even stuck up a conversation with a beautiful Thai waitress. Despite the temptation, I stayed loyal to my hopes with May and ended the night alone. The next morning, May picked me up and took me to the airport. She was quiet, and the energy between us had shifted. I slipped her 10,000 baht, feeling like I owed her for the time and expenses she had taken on during my stay. Once back in the UK, things with May cooled off rapidly. Our messages became fewer. When I finally asked if something was wrong, she simply said she did not want a boyfriend. That was that. I moved on, but she still sends a birthday message every year and occasionally reaches out when she is in Europe. Even though things did not work out with May, I still believe it's possible to meet a good Thai girl. You just have to look in the right places. Well, you know what? Reading between the lines on this story, I can kind of guess what really happened here. So May was an older woman, and she was probably more than likely looking for a partner, a long-term partner, and this is why she was a bit cool at the beginning. And the fact that the guy tried to give the mother 5,000 baht and he slipped 10,000 baht into her purse at the airport, she probably took great offence by that, and of course wouldn't have said anything to him. She would have just thought, well, he sees me as that sort of a girl. The very fact that she took him to her home and introduced him to her mother is a big sign she was looking at him as a possible long-term partner. Okay, right, let's jump into story number 4. Hi Peter, my journey to Thailand has a different twist to it. It all began in 2003 when I visited the tropical island of Koh Samui for the first time. It was a completely new experience for me. The stunning beaches, vibrant culture, and relaxed atmosphere left a lasting impression. I stayed at a beautiful seaside resort where I could truly unwind and soak up the peaceful surroundings. A year later, I was shocked to learn that the very resort I had stayed in was damaged by a massive storm, as I saw it featured in my local news. A few years later, I found myself returning to Thailand, but this time I explored Bangkok and Chiang Rai, discovering the contrast between bustling city life and the serene mountain countryside. Around this time, I was fortunate enough to land a job in Singapore, where I lived for several years. During my time there, my passion for tropical climates deepened. In 2014, while I was based in Tokyo, I asked a Thai colleague for recommendations on places to visit in Thailand. He suggested Krabi, a place I had never heard of before. Intrigued, I decided to give it a go. After spending a few days in Bangkok, I took a flight to Krabi, and the laid-back vibe of the town immediately drew me in. I stayed at a charming little guest house near the beach, which was perfect for quiet strolls and evening sunsets. During my walks, I found myself peeking into real estate agents curious about the affordability of beachside apartments. I also enjoyed a few quiet evenings at local cafes where I can sit and chat with a friendly staff without the noise and distraction of crowds. I wasn't much interested in the nightlife but it was nice to relax and have good conversations over a cup of coffee. Towards the end of my stay, I visited a massage parlour where I met a lovely woman named Marley. She was in her early 50s with a kind smile and impressive command of English. It didn't take long before she shared her story. She had spent her years living in Europe and returned to Thailand to take care of her aging parents. We hit it off well and spent the remainder of my time in Krabi together, talking about life and enjoying each other's company. When I returned to Tokyo, I couldn't stop thinking about Marley and the peaceful vibe of Krabi. I find myself drawn back, and I began considering whether buying a condo there might be a good idea. A few weeks later, I booked another trip, this time with a clear goal in mind. To explore real estate opportunities, I checked into a modest hotel and met up with Marley again. She introduced me to new places, shared local customs, and made sure I experienced the authentic side of Thai life. I also lined up a few meetings with local real estate agents. The agents showed me a variety of places, mostly older apartments on the outskirts of town. The prices were low, but the locations didn't feel quite right to me. After a few days of looking at different properties, I wasn't convinced I had found what I was looking for. Still, the idea of owning a place in Krabi kept lingering in my mind, and I knew I would return one day. After a month later, I found myself back in Krabi, staying at the same hotel. Marley and I spent more time together, and I raised my budget slightly to look at better properties. Even though I came close to buying a condo on one occasion, I backed out at the last minute. I just wasn't sure if it was the right investment for me. By the time I left, I was convinced that my search for a place in Krabi was over. But as you might expect, I ended up returning again, this time following a business trip to Hong Kong. The agents showed me a few more properties, and I finally found a condo that seemed like a perfect fit. A 2-bedroom apartment on the ground floor with direct access to the pool. I signed the papers, but the next day I had second thoughts. I realised that although it was a good deal, it wasn't quite what I had imagined. Unfortunately, cancelling the deal cost me a hefty deposit, but I decided to move on. Despite these setbacks, I wasn't ready to give up. On my next trip during the Chinese New Year holiday, I viewed a development I had been eyeing for a while. To my surprise, the owner was honest about the poor condition of the unit, which looked nothing like the photos. Frustrated, I left the viewing. In my distraction, walked into a low-hanging street sign, giving myself quite the headache. Later that year, I received a call from an agent about a newly available unit in the same development I liked. It was a ground floor condo with direct beach access, and I decided to take the plunge and buy it. It turned out to be one of the best decisions I've ever made. Shortly after the purchase, I met a British couple who now rent the condo from me every year for 6 months, which covers the costs. When they aren't there, I use it as my personal gateway. The location is fantastic, close to the beach, the local markets, and the quiet bar streets. I plan to retire early and spend more time there. While there are ongoing debates on YouTube about whether it's better to buy or rent in Thailand, I've been lucky with my investment. However, I always advise others to consider location and quality over low prices, as the real estate market in places like Krabi can be unpredictable. As for Marley, we still keep in touch and I see her whenever I visit. I do send her a small amount of money occasionally, but nothing too significant. Without her, I probably wouldn't have discovered the joys of living part-time in Krabi, and I'm grateful for that. My advice to anyone looking to buy in Thailand: take your time, rent first, and get to know the area before making any big decisions. So on a personal level, I always advise people not to buy property here in Thailand for several reasons. Firstly, there's an abundance of places to rent, and rent is very, very cheap all over Thailand. It's one of the things that hasn't seemed to have increased. The rents haven't increased much over the years. The other thing is, it's a saturated market. I've known many guys who have bought condominiums, apartments, and they really struggle to move them on, and people who are really desperate to get rid of them sell them at a loss. The last thing I can think of is you might find a location that you think is paradise, heaven on earth. You love it, you love the area, the bars there, the shopping malls, whatever, and you decide to buy an apartment. 6 months down the road, you're bored with it and you want to move on. Well, you're now stuck with an apartment, aren't you? It's personal choice. It's down to everybody. They have to decide for themselves. But as I say, the advice I normally give is don't buy a property in Thailand unless you're absolutely 100% sure. And like the guy says in this story, take your time, rent first, and check out all the areas. Okay, as I said at the beginning of the video, we are on a marathon today, so let's jump straight into story 5. We've got one more after this, a short story, but quite a sad story. Hey Peter, it's Dave from Galway in Ireland. I've been a big fan of your YouTube channel for ages now, and after hearing so many people share their experiences about Thailand, I thought it was finally time to send in my own. A bit about me first. I'm 47, single most of my life, and I've got 2 sons who are grown up and living their own lives now. Their mum and I split years ago, but we're still on good terms. I've always been into fitness, played sports all my life, and people usually tell me I look younger than I am. I've been lucky enough to travel quite a bit, and being single has definitely made that easier. So back in 2019, I finally decided to visit Thailand. To be honest, my only regret was not going when I was younger. It's an incredible place for a guy like me. I booked a package through a travel agency here in Ireland and opted for a guided tour since it was my first time there. The trip was an open booking, so I knew I'd be travelling with a group of other first-timers. That sounded perfect. After a delayed flight from Dublin, I landed in Bangkok 7 hours late. I can't remember the name of the hotel, but it was near Carlson Road, right by the canal. I checked in, dropped my bags in the room, and then went to a meeting room next to the reception where I was introduced to the rest of the group. Everyone was from Australia except me, and our tour guide was this Thai woman named Dal. Dal was attractive and had a way about her that was pretty captivating, though I never made a move. Turned out she was married to an Australian guy anyway, so that put things into perspective for me quickly. Anyway, we spent a few days exploring Bangkok before heading off on a night train to Chompom, where we stayed at this gorgeous beach resort called Nana Beach. The Australians were older than me, mostly couples, so I wasn't sure I was going to meet any local women without looking like I was on some kind of desperate mission. Fortunately, the group would usually call it a night pretty early after a few drinks after dinner. That left me some time to slip out and meet the local ladies without drawing too much attention. The next part of the trip took us to a small island. I can't recall the name, but you've probably heard of it. It's the one where a few tourists have gone missing over the years. After that, we moved to Koh Samui, which is where I met Yai. Yai was a divorced local woman with 2 kids. Her eldest had already left home and was working, so she wasn't too tied down. She owned a small business on the island, 2 clothing shops and a little shop that sold tourist trinkets. We hit it off immediately. Yai was like my unofficial guide, taking me to spots most tourists would never find on their own. She really knew her way around the island, and I got to experience the local side of life there in a way I never expected. The trip ended and I flew back to Ireland, but I was already planning to return in April 2020 to spend more time with Yai. 4 weeks this time. But as you can guess, the world had other plans. Travel was out of the question and Koh Samui was hit hard. Yai ended up leaving the island after 18 years and moving back to Isan, where she had built a house for herself and her son. Since then, we've kept in touch. She calls me every morning at 11 a.m. and every night at 11:30 p.m. without fail. We've kept up this routine since I left Thailand in 2019. I've explained to Yai that I can't move to Thailand full time. I'm just not in a position financially to do that. I work a regular job, nothing fancy, so it's not like I'm sitting on a pile of money. But it's comforting to know that if things ever do get serious between us, she's got her own place and she's never once asked me for money. I have sent her a little bit here and there, like 5,000 baht, which isn't a lot to me, but makes a big difference to her. I'm hoping to head back to Thailand in 2025 and can't wait to see Yai again. Thailand's become a special place for me, not just because of the beauty of the country, but because of the amazing people. Like Yai, who make it feel like a second home. It's absolutely amazing the amount of guys who come here just for a little holiday, as it were, and they fall in love with a girl and that's it. They don't want to go anywhere else. And I suppose, I'm included in that because I now live out here full time. I can't think of anywhere nicer in the world to live. And I've been to a lot of countries in my hotel career. Great stuff. Right, okay, this is the last story. It's not a very happy story, I'm afraid, but you can learn lessons from it. So I'm going to just jump into it. This is story number 6. I knew an Australian guy living in Pattaya who couldn't bear the thought of leaving the nightlife behind and going home to Australia broke and retired. That night, he was supposed to catch a taxi to Bangkok to head back home. He jumped off a building. It's a tragic situation, but the bar scene can be really addictive, and these days, the prices for drinks aren't as cheap as they used to be. Even the so-called cheap bars have average prices now, especially in places like Bangkok. If you want to hang out with any of the ladies in the bars, it's going to cost you a good amount of cash. Between buying ladies' drinks, paying bar fines and anything else that might happen later, add on taxi fares, a late night meal from a restaurant or 7-Eleven, and you're easily spending around £100 a night, 4,500 baht, for a night out. If you decide to spend more time with a lady for a couple of days, the costs keep piling up, and before you know it, your wallet's empty after just one encounter, and then it repeats. It's important to remember one thing. Thai bar girls love spending foreign men's money. If you're thinking about having one of them as a girlfriend, you'll need to support her with at least 20,000 to 30,000 baht a month, about 500 to 750 pounds, or $800. On top of that, you'll be paying for all her meals, drinks, outings, taxi and laundry. If she has health issue needs, glasses, dental work, or anything else, that's more money out of your pocket. Plus, if she's got a child back in her village, expect to help her family with any medical expenses, which can be a real burden. You'll feel the pressure to help, and saying no can make you feel guilty, especially if her parents are seriously ill and you can't afford treatment. This isn't something you can ignore. It's a reality many foreigners face. And to add to the money issue, bar girls can be very fickle. The prettier they are, the more likely they are to move on if someone with deeper pockets comes along. It's part of the business for them, and it's not surprising considering how they earn a living. The bottom line, the foreign guy often ends up broke, heartbroken, and sometimes even depressed. In the worst cases, they feel suicidal. Sure, some relationships with bar girls do work out, and good luck to those guys. But honestly, it's like rolling the dice with a slim chance of winning. Similar to throwing all of your savings on a roulette wheel and hoping for the best. I'll admit, I didn't follow my own advice. I fell for a young woman in Cambodia, and despite knowing better, I let my guard down. She seemed so different from all the other girls in the bar, and for a short while it was great. But like all things, it ended, and not without some drama. Even though she dumped me for someone richer, I still had to deal with the emotional fallout. A wise man once gave me solid advice. When it comes to choosing between a woman and money, always go for the money. That way, when she leaves you because you didn't invest your savings in one of her big business ideas, at least you'll still have something to fall back on. It's hard to argue with that logic. Always keep an eye on your bank account and think long and hard about what kind of life you want. A lady from the bar scene? Most importantly, stay in control of your finances because no one's going to feel sorry for a broke and lonely foreigner in Thailand. I couldn't agree with that sentiment anymore. He explained it very, very well. Unfortunately, over the years, there has been many guys have been ripped off. They've invested in schemes. They've found girls in bars, and you know the story. She's different. She doesn't want to work in a bar. They've invested their life and their savings in this girl. They end up getting ripped off. They're over 60 a lot of the time. They can't just stand up and brush themselves off. They've lost everything. They've got nothing to go back to their own country to, and they end up, as this guy says, jumping off a building. Very, very sad. So you've got to go in with open eyes. These girls are very, very good at what they do. They've been very well groomed by their peers, and it's almost like a battlefront, a nice battlefront, but you have got to take care. Right, guys, that's it once again for this long set of stories, 6 stories this week. Thanks for hanging on in there to the end if you did. And as always, if you're sitting on a story and you're thinking about sending it in, please do. I'll change names. I'll make it anonymous, and you too can have your story read out right here on Thailand Bound. But for now, thanks again, guys, and I'll catch up with some more stories next week.